So how do you know that you're on the right path when you're building something? And at least for me so far, it the signal. So you can't go by like financials. You can't go by not when you're starting and building things. It's very hard to do that because those financials just don't necessarily exist, right? Particularly for many years, right? It's a presumption to think that if you're doing something, so some things that are very close in terms of technology, in terms of how we understand the way that the world works, right? Like mowing the lawn, for example. We know how that works. You'll see instant financial return from that. And the more effort that you actually put in, the better off that you actually are. And that's an age-old story that we know. But the harder story are things that we're kind of making up as we go. And we're trying to convince ourselves and convince other people that this thing is legitimate. And at least for me, and this is a hard problem, this is like very much the story of what you do in the research game. This is very much the story of what you do when you're, in startup land. You're trying to kind of grapple for that feeling or product market fit, whatever. And at least for me, it's when you can be more of yourself and it makes you feel good for being more of yourself, right? Like when I started doing this whole reciprocity project, and mind you, I've spent a great deal of money. I'm still like, is this for me? Am I doing the right thing? Like all of those questions. But I am no longer afraid to talk about me as if I'm me. And I think that is a really good sign. And, that seems kind of silly, I realize. But what I'm talking about is you reach a stage where you're not necessarily making things up. You're not afraid of telling that story, that you can be open about it, that you have stories to tell along the way, right? Like when I started doing this whole reciprocity project and building this platform to create non-rejectable research papers, I was terrified to tell people. I was like, people are going to steal my idea. What are people going to think of me? I'm a charlatan for a long time. I don't know what I'm doing. Why would anybody take me seriously? I'm not an expert in this area. And it wasn't until I did this enough and became much more open with who I am that it began to resonate with me and other people. And it was the moment when I can actually speak more of these experiences, right? Like, why am I actually doing this? Why am I building this platform? And, despite the fact that there's AI technology and all of that stuff coming out, it's actually because of that I forecasted that in the first place, of why I started building this platform. But at the same time, those AI technologies are not going to replace many of the experiences that we go through. It's not going to be there in the corner. It's still hard. You still need mentorship. You still need somebody. And nobody really knows what they're actually doing. And unless you've struggled in it and you understand this experience, you don't get it. And so how do I know that I am that feeling of this is working for me as I'm openly talking about this. At least as open as I could be, because I'm a very shy person to begin with, but I'm very open about it. And when I go and talk to people, it's no longer like I'm afraid to talk about it. I want to actually I'm very passionate about it. And other people are coming up to me in weird ways, right? Like some people have seen me or heard me, not everybody, but they come up to me in weird ways where, they get it. They get all of this and they understand the journey because we've all gone through it. We all understand that it's not an easy process. And, we pretend that like it's a sort of easy process. That's what the world says. But when you're building something, I'm targeting, the researchers. But this is true of anything. When you're building something that's amorphous, in the research game, you're building an idea, you're writing papers, and there's no right answer. And having a support system of some sort that walks you through, that gives you positive feedback, which is impossible to find, that is hard. And that is deeply needed often. And, the funny thing is when people see that why of, I'm struggling, like people go through that and then they get it, right? So it's very stressful. It's very difficult for me to communicate that, but it's getting easier. And I think that's where people are starting to get why I'm trying to do this. What's the message? As you start doing this, you really begin to understand that, finding that is more about finding yourself. It's really interesting, right? Like being a good leader, being somebody that does something that, they're trying to build often requires a tremendous amount of personal growth where you're really good inside. And even if you're not really good inside, that you can work towards it, right? I think, I've mentioned this before. Happiness is not something where you're happy, not happy. Happiness is a skill. You develop it. It's a capability. You work at it. It's something that you sharpen, not something that you're happy and not happy. And so you need to be the one that takes charge of all of these things and works towards it. And I've deeply understood that now as I begin to do this, is that there's nobody doing that, helping. There's not that middle ground. And when I can say this, and when I could be more open about it, and people start to get it, it's a remarkable journey to go through, because I'm going through that journey myself. And I'm growing as well. And that's how I know I'm actually thinking that things are on the right path. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.